During the 1960s, something happened that was on an order that had never been seen before. Suddenly, you had chemical contraception available to women with something like a 98% accuracy if used according to plan. And at the time, people thought that this would be a great liberation. There were even voices within the Catholic Church that thought adopting this would be a liberation. It would make it possible for people to plan their families, for example, with more accuracy. It would, it was said, improve relations between husbands and wives because they wouldn't be anxious all the time about unplanned pregnancies. And it was said, and this part turned out to be true, it would empower women to enter the paid workforce as never before because suddenly they could be sexually active and not have children. These were the promises that were made at the beginning of the sexual revolution, and as I say, many people bought into them. Something happened that was not expected. Instead of delivering liberation and happiness, within just a few years, rates of marital breakup began to skyrocket. Divorce skyrocketed. Within a decade or so, rates of cohabitation, living together without getting married, also increased, and fatherlessness became something that had been unusual and stigmatized into something that was instead ubiquitous. And that's the world that we live in today. We live in this world created by the sexual revolution. And one also has to mention, of course, abortion, which was not legal until a few years after the widespread adoption of the birth control pill. Why? Because, as we see across the world, the adoption of contraception mandates the legalization of abortion as a necessary backstop. And in my books, I write about, for example, the way in which abortion became legalized in country after country, not because people had reached an elevated state of consciousness where they suddenly thought this was a good thing and something they'd always wanted. No, it became legalized because in a world where contraception is intended to prevent a pregnancy, a contraceptive failure calls into being a backup plan, and that is abortion. Now, I go through all of this to say that none of it was foreseen in the 1960s when all of this started, when people thought that the adoption of contraception would be an unmitigated boon for not only women, but for humanity. And the fruits of all this have been very different than was predicted by anybody except the Catholic Church. The response of the culture to the Catholic Church's standing by its teaching of 2,000 years that artificial contraception was wrong was yuck. Was we reject that. The response of the culture to the Catholic Church was the Catholic Church is ridiculous. Here we humanity have come up with this new technology that will help people to control their fertility, and the Catholic Church stands against that. Then the Catholic Church is stuck in the Middle Ages somewhere and won't get with the modern world. That was the reaction. That was the polite reaction of most of society to Catholic teaching in this matter. And what people did not emphasize, which was also true, was that this encyclical, Humanae Vitae, in 1968, which just reiterated Catholic teaching, was not doing anything new. Since the earliest days of the Church, there had been teachings against contraception, as there were teachings against many practices common to the Roman pagans of the era, including infanticide, including homosexuality, including bestiality. Christianity got its start with a sexual moral code that was strict by any standard, including even by the Judaism from which it sprang. And this moral code has remained untouched for 2,000 years, whether the world laughs at it or not. What's interesting is that since the 1960s, evidence has been piling up that there is truth in that code, that there is a vindication to that code that has not unfolded until now, when we see the results of so many people in the world living in defiance of that code, or living as if that code has no truth in it. There's a profound irony here for Catholics, for all Christians, for the church, and for the neo-pagan people of modernity. And the profound irony is that so many people wanted to abandon this long-standing, tough moral code, just as every decade since the 60s has piled up evidence that living in accordance with that code is actually better for people and their flourishing and their happiness than living without it.